Hello, how's it going, everybody? Today, we're jumping into Acts chapter 22. So let me get that up here and we can get going. All right, no lagging. Perfect. Let's get the text up. All right. Acts chapter 22. This is going to be an interesting one. Let me open up my Bible. What was the last thing we talked about? Addressing the Jerusalem mob. What was that? So when he had given him permission, Paul stood on the stairs and motioned. Okay, it's continue. Right. So they had arrested Paul, right? And now he's about to speak, and we literally stopped. This chapter 22 is literally him about to speak. So let me just go ahead and read this section because it ties in right here. So, but Paul said, "I am a Jew from Tarsus, and in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city, and I implore you, permit me to speak to the people." So when he had given him permission, Paul stood on the stairs and motioned with his hand to the people. And when there was a great silence, he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, saying, and this is 22.
Brethren and fathers, hear my defense before you now.
And when they heard that he spoke to them in the Hebrew language, they kept all the more silent.
I was wondering why yesterday, why they pointed out specifically that he spoke in the Hebrew language. Well, here we go.
I am indeed a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel, taught according to the strictness of our father's law, and was zealous toward God as you all are today. I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women, as also the high priest bears me witness, and all the council of the elders, from whom I also received letters to the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring in chains even those who were there to Jerusalem to be punished.
So Paul is saying, hey, I know where you're coming from. I'm just like you. And honestly, probably a step even beyond you, because I persecuted these people. I went after them and put them to death. But look at me now.
Now it happened as I journeyed and came near Damascus at about noon. Suddenly, a great light from heaven shone around me. And I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" So I answered, "Who are you, Lord?" And he said to me, "I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting." And those who were with me indeed saw the light and were afraid, but they did not hear the voice of him who spoke to me. So I said, "What shall I do, Lord?" And the Lord said to me, "Arise and go into Damascus, and there you will be told all things which are appointed for you to do." And since I could not see for the glory of that light, being led by the hand of those who were with me, I came into Damascus. Then a certain Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good testimony with all the Jews who dwelt there, came to me, and he stood and said to me, "Brother Saul, receive your sight." And at that same hour, I looked up at him, Then he said, "The God of our fathers has chosen you, that you should know his will and see the just one, and hear the voice of his mouth. For you will be his witness to all men of what you have seen and heard."
There we go with that seeing and hearing.
And now, why are you waiting? Arise and be baptized, and wash away your sins, calling on the name of the Lord. Now it happened, when I returned to Jerusalem and was praying in the temple, that I was in a trance and saw him saying to me, "Make haste and get out of Jerusalem quickly, for they will not receive your testimony concerning me." So I said, "Lord, they know that in every synagogue I imprison and beat those who believe on you. And when the blood of your martyr Stephen was shed, I was also standing by consenting to his death and guarding the clothes of those who were killing him."
It was right after that, after we saw that happen, the martyr Stephen dying, and Paul was there witnessing. Well, Saul was there witnessing. He left there, and then on the way to Damascus after that was when all this occurred, and he heard Jesus' voice and all that.
And he said to me, "Depart, for I will send you far from here to the Gentiles."
And they listened to him until this word, and then they raised their voices.
"Away with such a fellow from the earth, for he is not fit to live."
Then
They didn't like that that God told him to go and speak to the Gentiles, because God was theirs. God was the Jews. So the fact that God told Paul to go speak to the Gentiles, that means Paul is lying. So it seems like the Jews were putting God in a box. They're saying, hey, God wouldn't have done this. So if Paul is saying that God told him to do this, then clearly Paul is not talking to God. He's talking to something else.
as they cried out and tore off their clothes and threw dust into the air, the commander ordered him to be brought into the barracks and said that he should be examined under scourging, so that he might know why they shouted so against him. And as they bound him with thongs, Paul said to the centurion who stood by,
"Is it lawful for you to scourge a man who is a Roman and uncondemned?"
When the centurion heard that, he went and told the commander.
Take care what you do, for this man is a Roman.
Then the commander came and said to him,
Tell me, are you a Roman?
"Yes,
With a large sum I obtained this citizenship.
but I was born a citizen."
Then immediately those who were about to examine him withdrew from him. And the commander was also afraid after he found out that he was a Roman, and because he had bound him. The next day, because he wanted to...
Let me pull up a commentary about that. I'm curious. Why... Let me see. Acts 22 commentary. The penalty for lying about one's Roman citizenship was significant. It wasn't the kind of thing people commonly lied about, so the commander could simply ask Paul directly. The verbal claim to Roman citizenship was accepted at face value. Penalties for falsifying documents and making false claims of citizenship were exceedingly stiff. Epictetus speaks of death for such acts. And not only that, it seemed like they were afraid to harm a Roman citizen. With a large sum, I obtained this citizenship. Because of all the commotion and the beating Paul had received, he probably looked terrible. The commander wondered how someone who looked like this could purchase his citizenship. The commander answered, "With a large sum, I obtained this citizenship." And Paul said, "But I was born a citizen." Oh, okay. I see what it's saying. So I thought the commentary was saying that they thought that Paul purchased the citizenship, but no, they're saying that the commander thought that Paul purchased the citizenship because he said, "With a large sum, I obtained this citizenship." So how did you do that? And then Paul answered, "Because I was born a citizen." Something of this sort may have been in the tribune's mind, as he said, "It cost me a very large sum of money to obtain a Roman citizenship." The implication being that the privilege must have become cheap of late, if a sorry-looking figure as Paul could claim it. According to Stott, Roman citizenship could not be bought for a fee, only for a bribe. Normally, only right or reward granted it. The point was not that the tribune doubted Paul's claim, but rather he was implying that anybody could become a citizen these days. "But I was born a citizen." Paul's parents or grandparents must have been awarded the right of citizenship for some good done on behalf of Rome. How the citizenship was acquired by Paul's father or grandfather, we have no means of knowing, but analogy would suggest that it was for valuable services rendered to a Roman general or administrator in the southeastern area of Asia Minor. So that's just speculation there. Paul was an extremely rare individual. It was uncommon to find such an educated, intelligent, devout Jew who was also a Roman citizen. God would use this unique background to use Paul in a special way, even as he wants to use your unique background to use you in a special way. The commander was also afraid after he found out that he was a Roman, and because he had bound him. Knowing what he now knew about Paul, the commander was very concerned for his own sake. But why were they so concerned? What was to fear from the fact that you tied up a Roman? Because he was Roman as well. When this became known, the reaction was immediate. It was a serious violation of Roman rights, wrong to even bind a Roman citizen without due process. There we go. And he had already violated Paul's rights by binding him. Okay, so that's the answer right there. So it seems like there were different standards. You could treat the Jews one way and you can treat a Roman citizen another way. So they had Roman rights, and then which is why the Romans kept referring to the Jews to, hey, your law. That's your law. There's no one all-encompassing law. It looks like they had separate standards.
Are you a Roman?
Yes.
With a large sum I obtained.
Accused by the Jews, he
But I was born.
withdrew from him. And the commander was also afraid after he found out that he was a Roman, and because he had bound him. The next day, because he wanted to know for certain why he was accused by the Jews, he released him from his bonds and commanded the chief priests and all their council to appear, and brought Paul down and set him before them.
Sanhedrin divided. Let's see.
Then Paul, looking earnestly at the council, said,
Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God until this day.
and the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth.
God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. For you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law?
What does that mean? That's an insult there. God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. What does that mean? Let me see. 23:3. Whitewash is the thin paint used to make something dirty look clean. Okay. So, Okay, so Ananias deserved this rebuke. The fact that Ananias had someone else do his dirty work did not absolve him from the ordering of the act. An insult. See, that's actually a pretty. That insult has meaning behind it. It's not just a name. So that must have hurt.
For you sit to judge me according to the law, and do you command me to be struck contrary to the law?
Do you revile God's high priest?
I did not know, brethren, that he was the high priest. For it is written, you shall not speak evil of a ruler of your people.
But when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council,
Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Concerning the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am being judged.
And when he had
So Paul is smart. We saw this back when he was speaking to the Greeks. He entertained their philosophical minds in the way he spoke, right? And now he said, but when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, Men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Concerning the hope and resurrection of the dead, I am being judged. So he's playing the sides now. So, I got to see how this plays out.
Hope and resurrection of the dead, I am being judged.
And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, and no angel or spirit, but the Pharisees confess both.
Okay. So, Pharisees believe in a resurrection. Sadducees don't believe in a resurrection. They don't believe in angels, and they don't believe in spirit. So right within the Jewish community, you have drastically different interpretations. To not believe in the resurrection, in the Holy Spirit, or in spirit and angels. I mean, going to the Old Testament, aren't there clear pointers to angels? So I'm curious, what did the Sadducees think angels were? And I remember we did look up what is the afterlife to a Jew, and we saw that there's no clear answer. Some even believed in reincarnation. So I'm very curious about this. Okay, let's look up Pharisee versus Sadducee. Okay, is there something that's organized a little bit better? Let me just go ahead and read this because we've got questions before and it's pretty good. Okay, so the gospel refers often to the Sadducees and Pharisees as... Well, let's skip. There's differences, okay. The Pharisees and Sadducees were both religious sects within Judaism during the time of Christ. Both groups honored Moses and the law, and they both had a measure of political power. The Sanhedrin, the 70-member Supreme Court of ancient Israel, had members from both the Sadducees and the Pharisees. So this is who we're talking to right now. This is where the division is happening. The differences between the Pharisees and Sadducees are known to us through a couple of passages of Scripture through the extant writings of the Pharisees. Religiously, the Sadducees were more conservative in one doctrinal area. They insisted on a literal interpretation of the text of Scripture. Okay, but at least in the Bible, the way it's translated, it literally mentions angels. So, again, another reason why I would really like to learn Hebrew and read the original text. if the Sadducees are taking a literal interpretation of the text and they don't believe in angels, that's really interesting. The Pharisees, on the other hand, gave oral tradition equal authority to the authority of the written word of God. So their oral tradition was on the same level as the written word of God. And they're the ones who believed in Pharisees and the Sadducees didn't. What? So did their view of angels come from oral tradition? And then where did because we know oral tradition, you pass it down, everyone's played the game of telephone. Things are going to get mixed up. So what's going on here? If the Sadducees couldn't find a command in the Tanakh, they dismissed it as man-made. Given the Pharisees and the Sadducees' differing view on Scripture, it's no surprise that they argued over certain doctrines. The Sadducees rejected a belief in the resurrection of the dead. But the Pharisees did believe in the resurrection. The Sadducees denied the afterlife, holding that the soul perished at death, but the Pharisees believed in an afterlife and in an appropriate reward and punishment for individuals. So when did the Pharisees believe that we would be resurrected? Because they don't believe in the second coming, obviously. So what are the events that occur for the Pharisees to, like when do they think that the resurrection is going to take place? The Sadducees rejected the idea of an unseen spiritual world, but the Pharisees taught the existence of angels and demons in a spiritual realm. Okay, I got to look more into this right now. Because is this going to go into it deeper, or is it just going to tell me the differences? Yeah. Okay, why didn't, let's go start with that first. Why didn't the Sadducees believe in angels? The Sadducees didn't deny the existence of angels, but it literally says that in the Bible, that they did. N.T. Wright offered some insight to Acts 23:7-9 in his tome, The Resurrection of the Son of God. Luke said that the Sadducees denied the resurrection, angels, and spirits, whereas the Pharisees confessed them all. What is meant by resurrection is quite clear, a return to bodily life after death. But what is meant by angels and spirits? We usually interpret these to be a reference to angelic beings of both the good and bad sort. The problem with this interpretation is that the Sadducees believed in angelic beings. Did Luke make a mistake? No. What? That's what I was thinking, because, there's clear reference to angels in the Old Testament. But then again, in the Hebrew, is it different? But then Islam believes in angels as well. All right, let's see. Let's keep going. Wright points out that angel and spirit were terms used in that day to refer to the immaterial part of man that survived death. Think back to Acts 12:14-16. Peter was imprisoned. Believers had gathered at Mary's house to pray, presumably for him. When Peter was miraculously delivered from the prison and showed up at Mary's door, in disbelief, the people said it was not Peter, but his angel. Okay, let me pull that up right now. Let's do New King James to be consistent. Yep. When she recognized Peter's voice, because of her gladness, she did not open the gate, but ran in and announced that Peter stood before the gate. But they said to her, "You are beside yourself. Yet she kept insisting that it was so. So they said, "It is his angel." Now Peter continued knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were astonished. So this guy, I think he's right. It's not that Luke is saying that they didn't believe in angels. They didn't believe in a spirit. Like when you die, your spirit is floating around everywhere. You're just dead. And then, well, they didn't believe in the resurrection. So they just thought when you're dead, you're dead. There's no spirit floating around. When Peter was miraculously delivered, apparently they thought he had been executed and the Spirit had come to visit them. When Luke says the Sadducees denied the resurrection, angels and spirits, what he means is that they deny both an intermediate state and a final resurrection of the body. The Sadducees were anthropological materialists, if you will. They believed the body and soul terminated at death. Okay, so now I want to look up, why did they not believe in a final resurrection? We saw an article. Why did the Sadducees not believe in resurrection? Oh, so somebody... Because when this guy was in grade school, they told him the answer was they are sad, you see. All right, let's see. Is this an answer? Somebody is answering it over here. Sadducees indeed are saying no to resurrection. Or is this the question? The Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection of the dead or the immortality of the soul, since these doctrines are not mentioned in the law of Moses. Neither did they believe in heaven or hell. They interpreted the law literally, intended to support strict justice as opposed to mercy toward the offender. Since Jesus supported all these things opposed by the Sadducees, Jesus did not fit within the Sadducean movement. Why? There is mention of heaven and hell in the law of Moses is the first 5 books. There's no mention of Sheol. Well, is Sheol technically hell or no? Or does that just mean under the earth? But wasn't heaven referred to in the New Testament already in Genesis? Okay, let's keep. Why didn't the Sadducees believe in a resurrection? Jewels of Judaism. This is a Jewish website. We might have a good answer here. Divided on the resurrection. Okay, here we go. As mentioned earlier, the Pharisees and the Sadducees came from 2 polar opposite perspectives regarding the Torah. The Sadducees held to a very literal perspective of the Torah, while the Pharisees equated oral tradition with the Torah, which allowed for a much wider interpretation. Where did this oral tradition come from also? That's another question. Since resurrection and the afterlife are never mentioned in the Torah, the Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible, right? The Pentateuch. The compilation of the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, okay. Where was I? The Sadducees held it, okay. Since resurrection and the afterlife are never mentioned in the Torah, the Sadducees believed that there was no resurrection, whereas the Pharisees believed in the resurrection. Yeshua himself dealt with the Sadducees in regard to the subject of the resurrection through a question that they asked him about involving a woman who had had many husbands, whom had all died. The Sadducees asked Yeshua which one of the men would be her husband in the resurrection. So they were trying to trap Jesus in this. I remember this question. So if the resurrection was a real thing, how would this work? Therefore, it can't be real because it doesn't make any sense. The outcome, whatever the outcome would be, wouldn't make any sense. So let's see. Yeshua confronted a misunderstanding that the Sadducees had regarding the way of life in the resurrection and thereby silenced his critics. Let's see what he said. You are mistaken, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels. So he's like, okay, but I was about to say, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but they're like angels. So he's like doing a 2-for-1. Like, you don't believe in angels, and you don't believe in the resurrection, but we figured out that angels was being referred to as a spirit, that intermediary place of limbo after you die. They didn't believe in that. But it looks like they did believe in actual angels in heaven. But concerning the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob? God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. And when the multitudes heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. So, also the other question is, where do they think Moses is right now? Where do they think Enoch is? Where do they think Elijah is? If they don't believe. I mean, I guess they don't. Okay, I guess the existence of heaven isn't. The existence of heaven doesn't mean that there isn't a resurrection. You could have You could have no resurrection and still have a heaven. It just means that we're not going to be in heaven. But Enoch, Elijah, and Moses are there, which is kind of odd, I would think. But let's keep going here. The Apostle Paul also used the division between the Pharisees and Sadducees regarding the resurrection to rescue himself from their hands by turning them against one another. That's hilarious, actually. Yeah, this is what we're in right now. We're talking about this right now. Okay, so let's look up that. What did the Sadducees think of Moses, Enoch, and Elijah? Moses, Enoch, Elijah. Let's just do keywords. Sadducees, resurrection, Moses, Enoch, Elijah. Why am I not seeing? It should... There we go. I'm asking the wrong question. We sort of answered that one. Because there can still be a heaven, but not necessarily a resurrection. So they don't believe in a resurrection, and they don't believe in any sense of like a spirit or intermediary place. And what was the other thing? Angel, spirit, and the resurrection. So now my question was, that's what the question was. Where did the teaching of the resurrection come from? Okay, so why did the Pharisee believe in the resurrection? We know it's oral tradition, but what did that oral tradition say, and where did it come from? These are just what they believed in the characteristics. This could be good. What if I just look up Jews in general? Jewish views of the resurrection and afterlife. Maybe we'll get something. Resurrection in the Torah. In traditional Jewish thought, the resurrection is when God brings the dead back to life. Resurrection occurs 3 times in the Torah. So, the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books. Yet, okay, see, now I'm confused. The Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection because it wasn't in the Torah. And then now we're saying that it occurs 3 times. In 1 Kings 17:17-24, the prophet Elijah asks God to resurrect the recently deceased son of the widow with whom he is staying. Okay. I see. So it's not the resurrection, you know? At a certain time, we're going to be resurrected. They didn't, in that sense, but people can be resurrected here and there. So it's not the resurrection. So that's why. Okay, but the Pharisees believed in a resurrection. That's what I'm understanding so far. Because this wouldn't have counted for the Sadducee as any indicator of, an all-encompassing resurrection, because it's just in one instance. Then he called to the Lord and said, "O Lord my God, have you also brought calamity to the widow with whom I am staying by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself, right, and we know the story. Instances of resurrection are likewise recorded in all these different places. See, instances of resurrection, not an all-encompassing resurrection. There are numerous texts that record rabbinic discussions about resurrection. For instance, in the Talmud, a rabbi will be asked where the doctrine of resurrection comes from, and will answer the question by citing supporting texts from the Torah. From the Torah, for it is written, "And the Lord said to Moses, Behold, you shall sleep with your fathers, and this people will rise up." From the prophets, as it is written, "Your dead men shall live. Together with my dead bodies they shall they arise. Awake and sing, you that dwell in the dust, for your dew is as the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out its dead. And the roof of your mouth like the best wine of my beloved, like the best wine that goes down sweetly, causing the lips of those who are asleep to speak. Sanhedrin 90b. Rabbi Meir also answered this question in the Sanhedrin 91b, saying, as it is said, then will Moses and the children of Israel sing this song unto the Lord. It is not said sang, but will sing. Hence the resurrection is deducible from the Torah. I wish I wish I could have a Sadducee here who could give me their opinion on that. Who will be resurrected? Okay, so did they believe? It sounds like they did believe in an all-encompassing resurrection. But not in the first 5. Wait, from the Torah. Am I going crazy? Torah. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. I don't know why I was counting 4 instead of 5. Yeah, okay. So it's in the Torah. And the Lord said to Moses, behold, you shall sleep with your fathers, and this people will rise up. Oh, no. Okay, yeah, that's not talking about resurrection. That's talking about Moses, you're going to die, and this people will rise up. That sounds to me like, hey, you're going to go sleep with your fathers, but your people, the people that just, the children of Israel, they're going to rise up as a nation, not rise up as in resurrect. So if that's all you got in the first 5 books, yeah, I can see why the Sanhedrin didn't believe in resurrection then. I'm curious. Let's keep going here. In addition to discussing proofs for the doctrine of resurrection, the rabbis also debated the question of who would be resurrected at the end of days. Some rabbis maintain that only the righteous would be resurrected. Resurrection is of the righteous and not the wicked, says Tanit 7a. Others taught that everyone, Jews and non-Jews, righteous and wicked, would live again. So you have completely differing viewpoints. So which is why I can understand the idea of the Sanhedrin. We're like, hey, if you're having interpretations and beliefs so drastic, then I'm just going to stick to what I know 100% is God's word. I don't know if this is going to Jewish oral tradition. Oral Torah. What is the oral Torah? Torah has 2 parts. The Torah Shebiktav, which is composed of the 24 books of the Tanakh, and the oral law. So the the Sadducees, didn't believe in this part. God told Moses that he will give him the Torah and the commandments. Why did God add the word commandments? Are there any commandments which are not included in the Torah? This verse, amongst others, is a clear inference to the existence of the oral Torah. Or are the commandments so significant that it was mentioned on its own as well? But again, if we're reading it in English, so it's hard to pick apart certain words, like the Torah and the commandments. Is and the really meaning and the, or is it meaning including? You know? Originally, the oral law was not transcribed. Instead, it was transmitted from father to son, from teacher to disciple. For how long? Approximately 1800 years ago, Rabbi Judah, the prince, concluded that because of all the travails of exile, the oral law would be forgotten and it would not be recorded on paper. He therefore assembled the scholars of his generation and compiled the Mishnah, a short-handed collection of all the oral teachings that preceded him. Since then, the oral law has ceased to be oral, and as time passed, more and more of the previously to oral tradition was recorded. There's got to have been some sort of, they had to have lost some. And I'm sure there would have, if there had to have been different sects of Judaism that believed certain things because they, they held on to a certain interpretation of the oral tradition, and other groups, thought another way of the oral tradition, because since it was oral, things can change. So I would imagine that there would be multiple belief systems within Judaism, which is why we probably have this differing opinion in resurrection. Where I looked up before, not in today's stream, but some Jews believed in reincarnation. The laws given at Mount Sinai, that's the 10 Commandments. 13 principles of Torah exegesis. When God gave the written law to Moses, he also instructed him how one is to study and understand the Torah. Every word and letter in the Torah is exact. That makes me wish I understood the Hebrew even more so. And many laws can be, because, you've seen all the, is numerology the right word? Where you've seen how, they have it with the Bible, like the Bible code, people use numbers to extract certain meanings and patterns within it. But I would think that it would be hard to do with the Bible because there's multiple translations. So how do you know? That means you're going to get the numbers wouldn't align from translation to translation, right? So I don't know how that works. But in the Torah, if every word and letter in the Torah is exact, then I could see it working. And many laws can be extrapolated from an extra or missing word or letter, or a particular sequence with which the Torah chooses to use. The 13 principles, which are the keys to uncovering the secrets of the Torah, are called the Shlosh Esre Midot Sheha Torah Nidreshet Bahem. I do not know what that means, and I don't know if I pronounce it right. For instance, one of the rules is anything that was included in a general statement but was removed from the general statement in order to teach something was not removed to teach only about itself, but to apply its teaching to the entire generality. That's very specific. Wow. An example of the usage of this rule is in Exodus 35. Well, we don't need to get into an example of the usage of the rule, but okay, so that's where the the distinction here. Why did God add the word commandments, the Torah and the commandments? So that's where the oral law derives its power from, its importance from. At least from this brief look into it. I don't want to spend too much more time because we still have to get through Acts 23. But that's still, we could look into it a whole lot more, because that's still a lot, like having a completely different belief systems based off of an oral tradition. So I get the Sadducees' point of view, but then no resurrection. And Jesus preached a resurrection. So Jesus wasn't sort of aligned with the Sadducees' point of view. So then there was some truth in the oral tradition. But I feel like it's kind of dangerous because there has to be some discrepancies in oral tradition. I feel like if you lived in one region and you lived in another region, and someone lived in another region, and another person lived in another region, and you would have, if you ask them, hey, what's the oral tradition in all the different locations, I would be pretty confident that there would be different oral traditions because they're oral. It wasn't written down for a while. So that guy who wrote it down we just read, I don't know if he distilled all the different takes into one and tried to make sure and see if everything was overlapping, and then I don't know how the process happened. Again, we can look into this a whole lot. There's a whole lot more to look into with that. But our main question was, do Sadducees not believe in angels? At least that's what my main question was. So they do believe in angels, but that's why I'm guessing it was grouped up here. And no angel or spirit, angel and spirit being the same thing, like how we saw with that instance with Peter. The angel is just another word for this intermediary state, the spirit state. But the Sadducee believed once you're dead, you're dead. You're not in this limbo state.
Assembly was divided. For Sadducees say that there is no resurrection and no angel or spirit, but the Pharisees confess both. Then there arose a loud outcry, and the scribes of the Pharisees' party arose and protested,
"We find no evil in this man, but if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God."
Now when there arose a great dissension, the commander, fearing lest Paul might be pulled to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him by force from among them and bring him into the barracks. But the following night, the Lord stood by him.
Be of good cheer, Paul, for as you have testified for me in Jerusalem, so you must also bear witness at Rome.
And when it was day, some of the Jews banded together and bound themselves under an oath, saying that they would neither eat nor drink till they had killed Paul.
Whoa!
Now there were more than 40 who had formed this conspiracy. They came to the chief priests and elders.
We have bound ourselves under a great oath that we will eat nothing until we have killed Paul. Now you, therefore, together with the council, suggest to the commander that he be brought down to you tomorrow, as though you were going to make further inquiries concerning him. But we are ready to kill him before he comes near.
So when Paul's sister's son...
Here's where I keep bringing up, what did Jesus teach us? That bigger perspective, that bigger picture thinking, that perspective. Make sure you have that perspective. They lost their perspective. They're defending their beliefs. They believe that Paul is being blasphemous. He is preaching of the things he is preaching doesn't align with the values of Judaism, and so they want him to stop. They want him silenced. They're protecting their community. But in order to do that, they are taking it upon themselves to break a commandment. See, and then immediately I'm thinking, hey, but what about war? You know, the Jews killed people in war, but that was God sanctioned. God told them to go and fight, so they killed. Here, God didn't. Well, they might think that God is telling them to do this because they're thinking it's a godly cause. This guy is blaspheming against God, therefore we need to kill him. So maybe it's justified like that in their minds.
Him, but we are ready to kill him before he comes near.
So when Paul's sister's son heard of their ambush, he went and entered the barracks and told Paul. Then Paul called one of the centurions to him.
Take this young man to the commander, for he has something to tell him.
So he took him and brought him to the commander.
Paul the prisoner called me to him and asked me to bring this young man to you. He has something to say to you.
Then the commander took him by the hand, went aside, and asked privately,
What is
Seems
it
like a
that
nice
you have
commander.
to tell
Nice
me?
guy.
The Jews have agreed to ask that you bring Paul down to the council tomorrow, as though they were going to inquire more fully about him. But do not yield to them, for more than 40 of them lie in wait for him, men who have bound themselves by an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, waiting for the promise from you.
So the commander let the young man
This is
depart
getting insane.
and commanded him,
Tell no one that you have revealed these things to me.
and he called for 2 centurions.
Prepare 200 soldiers, 70
This is like a
horsemen,
suspense
and
thriller.
200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night, and provide mounts to set Paul on and bring him safely to Felix the governor.
He wrote a letter in the following manner.
Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with the troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. And when I wanted to know the reason they accused him, I brought him before their council. I found out.
I have a question. How does Luke know about this? I mean, Paul could have told him all that, but how does he know about this letter? I mean, he probably would have. Did he get his hands on it somehow? Like, did he go around, get some? I mean, this was like an official letter, I guess. So it had to have been recorded somewhere. So maybe it must have taken a lot of research and dedication to get all the information to write all this.
That he was accused concerning questions of their law, but had nothing charged against him deserving of death or chains. And when it was told me that the
It was
Jews
very
lay
similar to
in
the
wait for
story
the
of
man,
Jesus.
I sent him immediately to you, and also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. Farewell.
Then the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. The next day they left the horsemen to go on with him and returned to the barracks. When they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. And when the governor had read it, he asked what province he was from. And when he understood that he was from Cilicia, he said,
I will hear you when your accusers also have come.
And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's praetorium.
Is that because he was Roman? 31. Let me pull up. Perhaps Felix hoped that Paul came from some place that required that someone else hears his case. Apparently, learning that he was from Cilicia meant that Felix would indeed be responsible to hear and rule on his case. Perhaps Felix hoped that Paul came from some place that required that someone else hear his case. Okay. And when he understood that he was from Cilicia, he said, I will hear you when your accusers also have come. Okay, so I didn't immediately take it that way. Apparently learning that he was from Cilicia meant that Felix would indeed be responsible to hear and rule on his case. I didn't read it like that immediately. I read it like I will hear you when your accusers also have come. So, because you're from Sicilia, I won't hear you right now. I will hear you when your accusers have come. But this commentary is reading it as, since you're from Sicilia, I will hear you. And I'll just do that when your accusers have come. And he commanded him to be kept, I'll pull a Bible Hub after this, to be kept in Herod's praetorium. This began a 2-year period of confinement for Paul in Caesarea. After that, he spent at least 2 years in Rome, taken together with taken together with travel time. The next 5 years of Paul's life were lived in Roman custody. This was a striking contrast to his previous years of wide and spontaneous travel. Yeah, that must have been tough for him. Okay, let's look at this. Acts 23, commentary, Bible Hub, verse 34, 35. The question was a natural one for a procurator of Judea to ask as to any prisoner brought before him. It does not appear why Felix was ready to take cognizance of a matter which apparently, to judge by the precedent set by Pilate, belonged to the jurisdiction of another. Perhaps he had no motive for conciliating the favor of the governor of Cilicia, or thought that the nature of the accusation overruled the nationality of the accused. So this is saying that this wasn't his jurisdiction. The Greek verb expresses the idea of a thorough hearing. The Greek word praetorium, he commanded him to be kept in... Okay, no. We want, I guess... Okay, let's see. Let's see another take. Cilicia had been at one time, and perhaps still was, attached to the province of Syria. It was so in the time of Quirinius. This will explain why at once Felix, without question, decided that at the proper time he would hear the cause. So Felix, his jurisdiction was in Syria. Palestine and the countries thereabouts being divided into several heptarchies and jurisdictions, the governors were very loth to infringe the limits of one another. Of Cilicia, a country in Asia Minor, in which was Tarsus, where Paul was born, and from his birthplace he is reckoned to belong to that province. Okay, here, it looks like this. Okay, here. And when the governor had read the letter, which he doubtless opened and read as soon as he had received it, not knowing what important business might be contained in it, or of what dangerous consequence a neglect of reading it might be, this showed care and diligence in him. He asked of what province he was, since he received by the letter he was a Roman, and that he might know whether he was under his jurisdiction, and whether the hearing of his case belonged to him, and it should seem that it rather belonged to the governor of Syria, but that the crimes he was charged with were committed in Judea, particularly that of profaning the temple. And when he understood that he was of Cilicia, which was a Roman province, in which Tarsus was, where Paul was born free. That's like, where's the end of the sentence? And when he understood that he was of Cilicia, which was a Roman province in which Tarsus was, where Paul was born free. I feel like that sentence is cut in half. And when he understood that he was of Cilicia, what next? Are these just excerpts from the whole commentary? So if I click on it, will it open up more? What was it, 23? No. That's how it ends. How is this ending with a semicolon? And when he understood that he was of Cilicia, I will hear it. Okay, it's just repeating. So he wasn't of the province where, it was not his jurisdiction, but because he was of Cilicia, which was a Roman province, it was okay. That's what I'm thinking. And he asked of what province he was, since he perceived by the letter that he was Roman, and that he might know whether he was under his jurisdiction, and whether the hearing of his case belonged to him. And it should seem that it rather belonged to the governor of Syria, but that the crimes. Why Syria, governor of Syria? Is that for the Is Cilicia under the governor of Syria? Where is Cilicia? It's a Roman province. Okay. So why did they think... Okay, the crimes were committed in Judea, but he was of Cilicia. So that's why. So because he was from Cilicia, even though the crimes were committed in a jurisdiction that wasn't under Felix, because the person was, he decided he could hear him, but only when the accusers have come. Okay. I feel like that was obvious, but I went like all over the place. All right, that's gonna be it for today. Monday, we'll jump into chapter 24, and we'll find out what Paul is accused of. So, hope you guys enjoyed today's reading. I think we had a really cool discussion. We asked some really cool questions and we got some answers. So they believed in angels. It's just that the angels, what we were referring to, is not what we thought. So, anyways, hope you guys enjoyed today's reading. Tomorrow, we'll jump into chapter 24, and we'll continue on from there. I mean, not tomorrow, Monday. We'll jump into 24. So, hope you guys have a great weekend. All right, and I'll see you all back on Monday. So, yeah, have a great weekend. See you Monday. Take care. Bye-bye.